So you were born at home?
Yes.
Name your brothers and sisters.
I have twin sisters, born in that order. And I had two brothers. Sadly, I have only one now. There was Louis, and he was 7 years younger than I. And Albert, whom we called Skip, who was 15 years younger than I.
And what's the age difference between you and your sisters?
I'm 2.5 years younger than they.
And what was your mother's full name?
Her name was Ida Doris Golden. She had no middle name.
And what about your father's name?
Aaron Morris Golden.
And where was your mother born, and when, if you know?
I have no idea of the shtetl, but it was in Russia.
And same with your father?
My father, I recall, saying he was born in Grodnik, Gubernia.
And do you know how long that they lived over there?
Well, I know my father came to this country in 1904. I'm not sure of his age.
Mm-hmm. And Wendy wanted to know why they came over to America.
Any Jew who lived in Russia at that time was very anxious to come here. Enough said.
And where did they go?
My family settled in Chelsea.
Do you know how they came over here? The circumstances coming over? Did their whole family come over?
My father's family came first. And they followed each other. Well, I can say the same about my mother's family. They all followed each other too.
And what did your father do for a living?
I don't know what he did in Russia, but when he came here, he repaired shoes, and then he worked at GE and Lynn.
Do you know what he did at GE?
No, I don't.
Okay. And what did your mother do for a living?
My mother sewed furs in Paris when she lived there as a very young girl.
So did she grow up in Paris?
She spent most of her years in Paris, and I think she might have been about 16 when they emigrated to this country.
Where did you live when you were growing up?
We lived in Chelsea.
What kind of a house?
It was a 3-family house owned by my 2 uncles, Max and Jacob.
Who else lived there in the house?
Those 3 families. I have to have water.
Okay.
The 3 brothers, Uncle Max and Uncle Jake, and my father, and their families.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember your grandparents?
I remember my mother's mother very well. Also my father's mother and father. And I remember that when we went to school as very young children, we all the grandchildren had to stop at the grandparents' house before they went home. Luckily, they lived across the street from where we lived. And we all got a penny.
Did you have a family nickname?
No.
Do you have any knowledge of the origins of your family name?
I know that my father's name was changed when he came here.
Do you know what it was changed from?
It was changed from Chayet to Goldman. To tell you the circumstances of the change would take too long.
Okay, and do you know about your mother's name or no?
I just remember asking my Uncle Harry once how the name Doris came to be. And the only thing that he could think about was that we might have been part of the expulsion of Spain. Oh, what do you call that? Did I say that right?
What did you and your siblings fight about the most? If you fought.
We never fought.
No? Where did you go to school?
I went to school up until the 4th grade in Chelsea. And from there, we had moved to Roxbury. So I went to school in Roxbury.
Was there a difference between Chelsea and Roxbury?
At that time, no. There's a vast difference today, you know that.
What were they like when you were growing up back there?
What was what like?
Chelsea and Roxbury. What kind of people live there?
Well, I would say the same kind. Although Chelsea was a haven, in a sense, for the Jewish people, because they all seemed to gather there. But in Roxbury, there were quite a few Jewish people also.
Do you know why you moved to Roxbury?
Why we were what?
Moved to Roxbury?
Oh, of course, my father bought a grocery store in Roxbury. He followed my grandmother, who first bought a store also in Roxbury. Everybody had to make a living. And my grandmother was here without a husband, but she still had children to raise. And she worked very hard.
Did you have a favorite subject in school?
It might have been Spanish, of which I don't remember a thing now. Just a couple of words.
And did you do any sports or activities?
I loved gym because we got a chance to dance, and I love dancing.
What kind of dancing?
All kinds of dancing.
Did you have a favorite, or you liked all kinds?
I liked Spanish dancing, mostly.
Describe household chores you had as a child, if you had any.
As a child, no.
When you were growing up, high school.
We really weren't regulated to household chores.
Any childhood illness?
I had what they called black diphtheria. And I know I was seriously ill. Because to this day, I remember being rocked in my mother's arms in a rocking chair. Probably, she held me upright all night long.
About how old were you?
I was either 4 or 5 years old.
And what kind of treatment did they have for that?
I know there were shots given to me. Other than that, I don't remember.
Where did your family go on vacations?
Who went on vacations? Although I do remember going on vacation to some farm with my aunt and uncle. But they had to bring me home very, very soon because I couldn't get along with my cousin Rose. She used to kill me. I was much smaller than she, and she used to really beat me.
Really?
She did. She used to kill me. I did nothing but cry, so my aunt and uncle brought me back home.
Where was it that you went?
It was to a farm, I think in Holbrook.
Sorry.
I know it was a farm, and I think it was in Holbrook.
How did you celebrate birthdays when you were growing up?
We never celebrated birthdays.
So just another day?
There was no such thing as a birthday party.
What was your favorite radio program?
I really don't recall having a favorite radio program. But I do remember when television came out.
When was that? Approximately.
Oh, don't ask me. But I know Tuesday nights we were all glued to the television, especially in Aunt Betty's house, my sister Betty's house, because they were the first ones to have a television.
Do you remember what you watched?
Milton Berle on Tuesday nights.
Did you have a favorite movie?
I didn't have. I just remember my mother used to take us to the movies, and I remember seeing East Lynne with the Gish sisters, Lillian Gish and her sister. And it was so sad because I remember a train wreck in the movie and and a baby being killed. And after that, I refused to go to the movies with my mother. I wouldn't go.
Do you remember how much a movie cost?
Maybe 10 cents. I'm not sure.
Did you have a favorite movie star?
No.
What
I didn't go for years after that.
Because of the beginning part, you're right on the edge there. But they take a lot of care in training the monkeys. Aren't they very sharp-witted too? Like they're gonna trip. All done? Guess this is a favorite. Too bad they come 3 vanilla, 3 vanilla. Name some popular hit songs, favorite groups from your youth.
I did like the Andrewses, especially when they sang By My Bist Machine. I like that.
What kind of music did they sing?
They sang what I don't know what you'd call in their day, but it must have been pop music. What?
Did you play a musical instrument?
Yes, my mother bought a piano. My sister Rose and I took lessons. I sometimes wish I took the piano when my mother offered it to me, but I didn't take it.
About how old were you when you took lessons?
Oh, I must have been about, I think about 14, 15.
Did you have a favorite song you liked to play?
No,
As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was very anxious to take dancing lessons, but my mother told me it wasn't that important and she couldn't afford it. It was 50 cents a lesson. I always held it against her.
Were you ever teased by other kids?
No, I don't recall being teased.
Did you ever encounter any anti-Semitism?
No, not really. But I do remember a girl in school, her name was Agnes Kilduff, who was very friendly towards me, and I towards her, until I stayed out of school one Jewish holiday, and she asked me why I didn't come to school, and I told her because it was a Jewish holiday. And the way she answered, I didn't know you were Jewish. And from then on, her friendship was very cold.
Tell about someone who had a big influence over your life. No, family member, teacher.
No,
Okay. Tell a favorite memory about your mother.
when she sang her lullabies, she had a beautiful voice. And I loved sitting in her lap and her rocking me and singing. And sometimes it was a French song. And it was very soothing. I loved that.
Tell about some good advice that she gave you.
Oh, I don't dare tell that.
Why not?
I don't tell because of my grandchildren. I wouldn't tell you. But she did give me some very good advice.
Tell a favorite memory about your father.
A favorite a memory?
Or what you remember the most about him.
What I didn't like was that we girls were very special to him. We could not have a sled. We couldn't have roller skates. We mustn't hurt ourselves. And that's what I remember about my father.
Did he give you any good advice that you can share?
I don't remember.
What was your first job and how much did you get paid?
My first job was being a salesgirl in a store called Kittenges. It was like a 5 and dime store
Where was that?
in Roxbury, and I worked on Saturdays, full days, for $2. This was while I was going to school.
What kind of games did you play when you were growing up?
We played a lot outdoors. We played with the cousins and my sisters. There was a game that we played. We picked up rocks and we had to run. And we played hopscotch. That's about all I remember.
Share a childhood memory about a death that affected you.
When my Uncle Max died, I really carried on like a baby. Because he meant a lot to me. I grew up with him. Sort of a father figure because he was my father's brother and he lived in the same house that we lived in.
Would you see him every day?
Yes, oh sure.
Did you have meals together?
Sometimes. And it was the first death in the family that really affected me. I was working in R.H. White's, and it was around Christmas time. And they sent me home because I could not stop crying.
About how old were you?
I was in high school. I must have been about 16, 17. But I really took that very badly.
Did your other siblings take it badly too?
Not as bad as I did.
What was your favorite holiday when you were growing up? Christmas?
I remember my Uncle Max filling his kids' stockings with coal.
What were some of the family traditions for holidays?
Passover. I have to drink. My grandfather would come to all the brothers' house and search all the windowsills with a lighted candle to make sure there was no chametz. I remember that.
And would you all get together for holidays?
I don't remember getting together.
What kind of gifts did you get for Hanukkah?
Money. Always money from my uncles. Especially. Just coins.
Did you have a hero when you were growing up?
No, I did not.
Who was your first boyfriend?
A fellow by the name of Benny.
Tell us a little bit about Benny.
Well, he made a very good impression on my father because he did business with my father. And so it seemed as though he had a career.
What kind of business did
And
he
the
do?
business was candy, soda. Candy and soda, I believe.
So he sold those to your father?
And he sold that to my father.
What kind of store did your father have?
My father had a grocery. My father really tried to make me, talk me into being serious with him, but I couldn't.
Why not?
He just didn't impress me that way. besides which I had met Joey.
Did you ever go on a date with Benny?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember where you went?
I didn't know where we were going, but he managed to bring me out to a beach where his relatives were. I think it was Salisbury. Wanted his aunts and uncles to meet me.
For a first
I was
date?
very upset about that because I thought he should have told me where we were going, and I wouldn't have gone.
Tell about the naughtiest thing you ever did.
The naughtiest thing? I never did anything naughty.
Why didn't you get your driver's license?
We never had a car.
Share a memory involving a war.
A war? I remember the First World War, my parents taking me to the depot to wave to the boys who got on the train.
Did you know people who got on?
Yes. There was one boy who lived next door to us, and he never came back. I remember my mother crying. I was very young. Another thing I remember is my mother sending me and my sisters to the city hall, and we would get ration tickets, I believe, for sugar. But the three of us did pretty good. Because I never questioned that we were sisters. I mean, I think if they knew that, they would have not given us as much as they did. Sugar was very hard to come by. But we got sugar.
What was your most prized possession as a child?
I never had a doll.
Teddy bears?
I never had a doll. But my aunt had a doll, big doll, it even walked. But my grandmother would not let me play with it because it was her daughter's. And she was afraid I would break it.
Did you have a favorite toy of yours?
I never had a toy. Never had a doll. How did I live without a doll?
What are some of the difference in houses? The house that you grew up in and houses today?
The house that I grew up in was more like a, I won't say a hotel, but the doors were always open, and we were all family. And each family had 4 or 5 kids. So we were a lot of kids in that house. What I remember vividly, really, is when the kids downstairs would fight. They'd run up the back stairs up to our house.
Were you on the top or the
And
middle?
we were on the top. And fly through the house. My mother would, they would drive her crazy. And they made so much noise. And down the front stairs. That's all I remember. The kids were free to go to Winnie's house.
Did you have a shower?
Are you kidding?
What did you?
We didn't even have a bathtub. But there was a community shower house
How often did you go?
every week. And it would cost $0.25. And we would take our showers.
What hobbies did you have when you were growing up?
We didn't have a hobby.
Do you have a story about standing up against odds for something you believed in? Anything else about your childhood that you would like to share? Happy memories?
No, our parents were always taught us, not that I think it's the right thing to do, but if we ever saw anybody that we thought might hurt us, to walk on the other side of the street, cross the street and walk on the other side of the street. Whether that was a good piece of advice or not, I don't know. My parents thought so.
Tell us about how you first came to know Joey.
Strange as it may seem, he was going with a friend of mine, a school friend of mine.
How old were you?
I was in high school, and that's how I met him. No, I didn't meet him through this friend. He was going with this girl whose name was Lillian, and she was really flaky. She really was. And I had another girl who was going steady with a fellow called Ray. Her name was Sadie, his name was Ray. And when Ray met Joe and Lillian, he couldn't understand why Joe was going with Lillian either. So he once cornered Joe, and he says, "I know a girl that you would really go for." And that was me. So he arranged a meeting for us, and we all went out for ice cream that night. And from then on, it was just Molly and me. He used to sing that to me.
What qualities attracted you to him?
He was very vivacious. Is that a good word for a man?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't shy about anything, and he loved to talk, which he did. And he was really dressed so nice in white ducks. Did you ever hear of that term?
No.
It was a white pants, sort of a short pant, I don't know. And he smelled like he had just come out of a shower. And we went for ice cream. And he spilled his ice cream soda all over himself. And that was our first date. And then he just kept calling me. And we lived within walking distance of each other. And we meet halfway. We weren't afraid to walk in those days. And from then on, my father was incensed because my father was sure he was not Jewish. He was very blonde, or red. His hair was red. His complexion was ruddy. He was very fair. And my father said he doesn't look Jewish. I said, "Papa, he is Jewish." He said, "Prove it to me." So one day when he came calling, I told him to go out in the kitchen and say something Jewish to my father. And he did. So then my father accepted him. He was all for Benny.
What did your mother think?
The funny thing is that whenever Benny saw me, he brought me a box of chocolates. And then Skiffy would come and offer Joe the chocolates. And my mother liked Joe. She really did. He worked in a grocer's, it was like a deli, which was also located near us. My mother would go there. I need a drink. And when my mother would order something that Joe had to put on the scale, she would say to him in Jewish, "Get your hands off the scale, Joe."
How long did you go together before he proposed?
About 2 years. And how he proposed was one day I came home from school. I was still in school. And, no, I was at work. That's what it was. And my mother said, "You got quite a big present today." I said, "What did I get?" And she took me into the living room, and there was a hope just there. And I says, "Mama, is this my present?" And she says, "Yes." "Did you know about it?" I said, "No, I didn't." And it was from him. So then I knew he was getting serious.
And did he ask you? Or was that it?
Oh, he asked me.
Do you remember where?
I didn't take anything for granted. What did you ask?
Where did he ask?
We were out with another couple, and we were in the back seat, and that's where he asked me.
When and where were you married?
We were married at the rabbi's house on, I believe it was on Seaver Street. There was a YH, a Hebrew Y. And the rabbi's house was next door to the Y
Was that in Roxbury?
in Roxbury.
And who was there?
You know, I think it was, whose phone's that?
I'll get it.
I'm sorry. And we were married in the rabbi's study. All my girlfriends were on the porch outside, waiting for us to come out. My mother and my father and my in-laws were there, and Joe's brother Bonnie and his wife Rose, and his sister Alice and Henry. And then we all went, and I forgot where. It might have been to Sharon for dinner. There was a very nice house there that the Jewish people always went to for affairs, and that's where we all went for dinner.
Did you go on a honeymoon?
We went that night. I was so excited. I had never been outside of Roxbury, and we were going to New York. And my cousin Rose and her boyfriend Larry took us to the railroad station to get on a train to go to New York. That's where we went. We stayed at the President Hotel. It's not in existence today. And it was so inexpensive. I think it was about $18 for a week. So we left all our clothes and took a bus to go to Atlantic City. We spent a few days there too. And we came back by ferry.
Where did you live when you were first married?
I lived with my sister-in-law, Alice,
In what city?
Beverly.
How long did you live there?
Joe was working for his brother-in-law, Henry, who had a drugstore. And we lived there until David was born, which was a very, very bad mistake.
Tell about the most serious problem or challenge you faced during your early years of marriage.
That was my problem.
How did
If Grandpa would want to take me to a movie or something like that, there was Alice. Couldn't go without her. And she would sit next to my husband.
How did you resolve that problem?
By moving.
Where did you move to?
We moved to Ashton Street, which was too close to Alice.
Tell the names, birth dates, and birthplaces of your children.
Well, David was born at the Harley Hospital in Codman Square in Dorchester and delivered by my Uncle Harry, who never charged me a dime, but gave David, the new baby, a nice gift. And that was in 1935. Norman was also born at the same place, under the same circumstances. And he was born in 1942, I believe. That was the year that can you remember the name of the nightclub that burnt in 1942? Because I know I had Norman, I had just given him a bath in a portable bathtub that I kept in the kitchen. And I heard the news come over the radio. It was very upsetting. Coconut Grove. And Alan was born in 1947 at the same hospital, the Harley Hospital, delivered by Uncle Harry. It didn't cost me a cent.
How did you choose their names?
David was named after Grandpa's grandfather, who never came to this country. And his middle name was after my Uncle Max, who had died. And Norman was named after my grandfather, whose name was Nissen Labe. So Norman is Norman Leslie. Alan was named after my father, whose name was Aaron Morris. Alan is named Alan. I can't remember his middle name. Isn't that awful? Yes. Had to be fancy. I should have left it alone.
Who is most like Grandpa and why? Of your boys.
Strange as it may seem, I think Alan is more like Grandpa.
How so?
Well, I think his temperament is like his father's. His impatience. Have you noticed that?
No.
I have. And I really believe that he is more like his father.
Who is most like you?
I always thought it was David, but I don't think so now.
So is Norman?
I think that Norman is more like me.
How so?
By his temperament. I think he's got my temperament. He has no patience. And I always thought that David was more like me, but he's not.
Who's he like?
I don't know who he's like.
What are some funny stories about the boys?
Well, they may not seem very funny. They weren't funny to me, but the time that, oh yeah, it was funny. Norman had an invisible friend, a horse that he hooked up. He'd come riding the horse at lunchtime. The kids came home for lunch in those days. And I would hear him tying up his horse in the backyard. Then there was a time that Alan was the baby. The kids had a good time with him. Sometimes I thought he was a toy. I'll never forget when your father picked him up and swung him around the kitchen table and cracked his head on the kitchen table leg.
He cracked his head? Did he have to get stitches?
No, he didn't have stitches. But he had a good cut on the side of his forehead.
Did Uncle Norman's horse have a name?
I think it did, but I don't remember what the name was. Maybe David remembers. You want any more?
Sure.
And there was the time that we went to Canada on a vacation. We took my mother. And we went to Quebec. And there was a mount something, I can't remember what it was. Would you kids know?
No.
And David wanted to go up there. The kids wanted to go up. And we looked up and we saw some people up there. And we thought we'd let them go. So the 3 kids went up. And we waited for them to come down. And we waited and we waited. And they never came down. Well, I really panicked. I wrung my hands and I cried and my kids are missing. So Grandpa went up there. And finally he looked down, came up to the edge, looked down, and he goes like this to me. He can't find them. And he hollered down, "There's nobody up here." Well, so he came down, and a crowd was gathering around me, and my mother too. We were both carrying on. Finally, they came down. What happened was the people we saw up there were on a tour. And they joined the tour. They just followed the people. And that's what happened. I was ready to kill your father. He was the caretaker, the big brother.
Did he get in trouble?
He almost did. Grandpa was really mad at him because he should have known better.
Huh?
Yep.
What did the boys fight about?
I took Alan out in the carriage for a walk, and while I was gone, they got into some kind of a fight. I think that Norman swung a towel and hit David, And David chased Norman. Norman ran into the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and the ceiling came down around him. And he hollered to David, "Don't tell Ma!" And that was the only time.
And what did Ma do?
I did nothing. I went upstairs because I found out that there was a leak in the upstairs bathroom, and that's why the ceiling came down. Called the landlord and went through some very stressful days because the landlord took his time about replacing the ceiling. And that was it. And I did talk about the time that he swung Ellen around.
Mm-hmm. How long did you live on Ashton Street?
Don't remember.
Approximately.
I lived on Ashton Street until David was in college. So, and Alan was in the first grade, first or second grade. I think it was the second grade.
And where did you move to?
Oh. From there we moved to this house.
Tell us about the North Beverly Pharmacy.
Well, after working for Uncle Henry, Grandpa was very anxious to be his own boss. And he found the location through one of the salesmen that came to the drugstore. And he was all for it. Got very excited. And he was very anxious to do this. But we didn't have enough money to start. So we borrowed money from my sister Rose and from his mother. She gave us some money to start with. And when my father came to look at the location, he was not supportive at all because he said, "I don't see any people here. I see a few cows and that's all." However, Grandpa was determined and I supported him. And I'll never forget when he, on opening day and week, if we took $8, if we took in $8 a day, that was great. But slowly and very slowly it built up.
Did you work there?
And not in the beginning, because Alan was still very young, and the children were in school, and I had to be home. And there was a little anti-Semitism we encountered up there. The first time was when the mailman delivered a letter that was addressed to Jew drugstore. And Grandpa almost threw the mailman out. He had a temper, and he threw the letter back at him. He said, "Did you see the sign on the door? It says Ralph had listened to me. It says North Beverly Pharmacy. Take a look at how this letter is addressed. Is this a Jew drugstore?" He went out with his head hanging sheepishly. But that's the way the letter was addressed, Jew drugstore.
Other?
Well, there was someone else who said, "Gee, we never had a Jew up here before." And Grandpa said, "Well, you have now. Do I look any different to you?" Oh, Grandpa was really he was mad, you know, and he let the people know that he was there to stay. And gradually, he made very good friends there, too.
What are some historical events that stand out in your mind?
Historical events. No.
Assassinations?
Excuse me?
Any assassinations that stand out in your mind?
Kennedy's assassination.
What do you remember about it?
I was very angry at whoever did it because we were all, people were really uplifted with him. He was young, he was handsome, and we liked the way he spoke. And his wife was beautiful, and people were really upset. And when his brother was gunned down, that was very upsetting too.
Question from Sheila. What do you think happened to Marilyn Monroe?
I haven't a clue. Only what I heard.
How much time do you have?